our final speaker of the night. So Courtney's 3 fun facts. She played the lead female role in an episode of Goosebumps when she was 12. She attended university at Royal Roads in Victoria, where they filmed the School for Mutants scenes for X-Men. And she has a burning desire to play in an NFL football game. Very cool. Courtney, come on up here and share your fuck up.
Thank you. Just this way? Awesome. All right. So, my story starts way back in 2017 with this amazing team of people at Vega. So this was going into my 10th year at Vega, and it had been a roller coaster of a few years. We had been through 2 acquisitions in a really short period of time, and I had loved the majority of my time there, and largely because I had an opportunity to be a part of building a culture, a team, really creating a plant-based movement, and really an entire category in health food and nutrition. But things started to kind of unravel shortly after we got acquired, and the culture really shifted pretty substantially and really made me kind of question and reevaluate what my purpose was, what my passions were, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be a part of, and how I was going to make my mark or make an impact in the world. So after a lot of soul searching, working with a life coach, really diving deep into what my passions were, I started to realize that I had a real desire to bring people together and have people connect more. I felt like that was one of the biggest things that we did really well at Vega, and was a huge part of why we were so successful, is because we really connected on a deep level as a team and really connected with our customers. And so as this was going on, as I was doing a lot of the soul searching and figuring out what my next move was, I was doing a lot of classes at places like Soul Cycle, Ride Cycle throughout my travels with Vega. And it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in the fitness world. And I would leave the classes just feeling so alive, so inspired, and would come back to Kitchener and be really kind of bored and defeated with the fitness options that we had in our community. So started thinking, okay, what can I do in that space that will allow me to really connect with people and create an environment that allows people to come alive and really kind of step outside of their comfort zone a little bit and make fitness and movement fun. So I hired this general contractor. So started to kind of really put all the building blocks in place and realized that I wanted to open a boutique fitness studio in Kitchener-Waterloo and really kind of create something unique for the community that didn't exist. And so there's a long story short, a lot of steps that led up to that point, but ultimately built a business plan, got some funding from the bank, and was in the process of searching for the location, and came across this amazing space that we're in now and realized that this was the spot. It was on King Street, it was uptown, it would give us access to all the core demographic that we wanted to reach, and things seemed like they were going really well until I realized that the space that we had signed a lease on it was half the size that we needed, because I made the assumption that we were going to be able to use the basement for the spin and the boxing, and that we could use the main floor for the yoga space. So I signed a lease, personally guaranteed it, and thought, okay, this is great, we've got our space. And then brought in a designer, Ada, who happens to be here with us tonight. And we start looking at the basement and thinking, wow, these ceilings are really low. And kind of take the measurements of a spin bike and realize that anyone that's over the height of 5'7", which is probably a good percentage of the people in this room, wouldn't be able to participate in a spin class in this basement. So at that point, my head is spinning like that. The foundation of hustle and flow is that there's hustle and the flow. It can't just be the flow. So, there's got to be a space to spin and not just do yoga. So at that point, my head's spinning. I start going back to the drawing board. How else could we kind of work with this space? We talked about like building a second level because the ceilings were really high to try and maximize it. But at the end of the day, it just didn't make sense. So I was, contemplating, do we just back out of this lease and start from scratch? But it had been already almost 7 months of searching for a location, and I had put so much time and energy into this vision and this plan and securing funding that it was like now or never. Like if I don't do this now and if I don't make it work, then I didn't think I ever would. So at that point, I started thinking, okay, maybe we're gonna have to just look at other locations, and had a conversation with the landlord and was like, what, I think we're gonna have to back out of this space. Like it's just not gonna work for us based on this. And Hail Mary, they were just in the process of converting their second level of the same unit to apartments. And so they so graciously offered to give us that space instead. The only issue was then we're taking on just over 6,000 square feet of space versus the originally planned 3,200. This is me standing on my head, basically trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do at this point and how am I going to afford, based on the existing business model, to pay for over 6,000 square feet of space. So you can imagine, there's just so many things going on in my head. There's so many signs pointing me to just give up on this. It's not going to work. And I finally just decided, what, we'll make it work. We'll figure out a way. I'm inventive. I'll make it happen. And so we made it happen. We proceeded with construction, and we got into the space, started training our instructors, and then started having classes running with music as we were training our instructors, and realized that we wouldn't be able to hold any other classes while yoga was going on because of the noise. So we invested all of this money in soundproofing and thinking that we were going to be able to run multiple classes at multiple times, which is ultimately what we needed to do to make the business model work. And after doing all of the training, realized, well, shit, like you can't be in a yoga class and hear people screaming their heads off in the spin class next door. And even though like we do yoga to music that is fairly loud, it was just very jarring, and you wouldn't be able to lay in Shavasana and go inward with all of this noise happening next door. So as much as the room was beautiful, it wasn't functional when all of the crazy people in spin are losing their minds. So that was kind of, a sign of things to come. And it was, a lot of points comical for me to just kind of look back and see all of these various fuck-ups and think like, how can we still be doing this after going through all of these setbacks? And I think it was just, we had so much passion for the vision and the people that we wanted to impact that we persevered, and we were solutions minded, and we had that growth mindset that Marsh talked about, and we weren't going to take no for an answer. And we've worked around it, and we've alternated class times around peak times to be able to offer yoga, spin, and boxing. But it's a great lesson that we learned for if we were to do this again at future locations, that we definitely have to factor in the setup of the studios and the layout of the studio to allow for the multidisciplinary model that we have right now. So a few months into business, we get all the sound issues sorted out. We have gone through all of the construction headaches, and there were many of those as well. That could be a whole other, there should be like a construction fuck up theme talk, because I have a lot of material for that as well. But a few months into operating, we start to do a deeper dive into our numbers and our customers, and realize that all of a sudden in February, our numbers took a deep dive for a 2-week period, and we were really confused as to why. And then it hit me that the students were on reading week. And when we started, I thought students were going to be a really small percentage of the business, because we're boutique fitness and it's a $20 class price point. And I just thought, a lot of students wouldn't have the disposable income to be able to allocate that budget for fitness. And then we realized that it actually was a good percentage of our customer base that were students, and we weren't really targeting them specifically. We weren't really providing options that worked for them as far as class times, as far as student packages. So that was really a good eye-opener to really take a deeper look into who our customer base was, which I know we really should have done before we opened. So that's another good lesson, is to not make assumptions around your demographic. I think that's a big one that I've learned. And even, I thought the majority of our customer base would be my friends and family. And, I can count on my hands the amount of my friends and family that actually are regular members at Hustle and Flow. And we thought that there would be a large percentage of people that work in the corporate spaces around Hustle and Flow that would be just flocking to our studio because it's in such close proximity. And we invested a ton in corporate outreach and programs and going to a lot of these companies to try and encourage their staff to come sweat with us. But really started to realize very quickly too that a lot of tech companies, as I'm sure have a lot of their own in-house offerings, and encourage people to kind of stay on site as long as possible versus leaving their place of employment. Why would you want to do that? So we really, again, that was a great turning point for us, where we started to look a lot closer at who was actually coming into Hustle and Flow and how we could reach them in different ways and target different people. So I think the biggest takeaway for me in all of this was that there's always going to be fuck-ups. There's always going to be failures. Success and growth are never linear. I feel like we're constantly taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I think it's just really, learning how to pivot and taking a step back and, what did we learn from this experience? And not to make assumptions. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. I think I was so passion driven and just knew that if I wasn't going to do this now, I might never do it. So there were a lot of things that I probably should have done that I skipped over because I wanted to just do it so quickly. So I think, I was naive in a lot of cases. And like Mallory talked about, there was a pretty steep learning curve for me in building out a physical space, building a team and building a brand and building a product is one thing, but I think, you know, a lot of people don't really realize the magnitude of creating a physical space that people are sweating in. You know, the HVAC was $60,000, and that like blew my mind. I was like, what? Like, how is that possible? And it's not like you can say no. You can't say no, or you know, you don't have a business. So there was a lot of times where I think, you know, the learning curve was very steep for me. So I think if that's the case, reaching out and doing a little bit more research, connecting with people that have done something similar, and really trying to understand, you know, some of the missteps they had along the way and how they could have been prevented had there been more analysis and preparation. So that was definitely a big learning for me, but also just the importance of surrounding yourself with good people and partners, like we talked about earlier as well. The fact that I had such great partners around me and such a great team at Hustle and Flow, we get through it together. And I know those aren't the last of the fuck ups. I know there'll be many more along the way, but I have the confidence to know that I'm failing with the right people around me, and we support each other through it, and we're gonna get through it together. So I think that's really important. And yeah, I think it's just, for me, so inspiring to know that there's so many other people out there going through the same challenges. So thank you to Marsha for hosting these events, because I think it is so important to share these stories of failure and to share the fuck ups and to share your challenges and to be vulnerable, because that's how we learn. And I feel like I've learned more in the last year than I have in my entire life through all of these fuck ups. So as much as it probably took 5 years off my life, you know, Hustle and Flow is thriving, and it's amazing to see the impact that we have on our community through movement and music and connection, and building a safe space for our community to come together and move more. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Courtney. I think there's so many lessons in there that could be applicable to anybody here in this room.